Hello, hello. Okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you all so much for being here this evening. On behalf of the Rockefeller Center for Public Policy and the Social Sciences, our partners at the Dartmouth Democrats and Hanover Lyme Democrats, we want to welcome you all to the Democratic Congressional debate for Congressional District 2. To those here in Hanover, as well as those joining us virtually, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here today. To the candidates, we'd like to thank both of you and welcome you on behalf of Dartmouth. It's so good to have you both back on campus.
As we have seen in the past few months, debates are a critical part of democratic elections. They let us truly understand our candidates, their issues, and their platform before we make an informed decision about who to elect. I have the distinct privilege of co-moderating today's debate alongside my good friend and current roommate, Quinn Allred. Quinn Allred is a member of the Christian and LGBTQ+ communities and is a two-time cancer survivor from Wake County, North Carolina. Though his career started in the fast food industry at the ripe age of 13, Quinn's passions have led him to becoming a politics, philosophy, and economics major here at Dartmouth. As we've progressed through Dartmouth, Quinn's motivation and brilliance has brought him into roles such as Executive Director of the Dartmouth Democrats, Vice President of the New Hampshire College Democrats, a Fellowship Coordinator for Men for Choice, and a member of the New Hampshire Democratic Party's Platforming Committee. The experience and ardor that Quinn brings to the debate stage today will make for a lively evening.
Thank you so much for that boastful introduction, Lucy, though the honors today are truly, truly mine. My co-moderator today, and every day if I had my way, is Lucia Vitale. Lucy Vitale is from Westwood, Massachusetts, and is pursuing a degree in government, public policy, and Spanish. Lucy has taken on women's rights as a catalyzing issue for both her work and her studies, and has worked for the Massachusetts Women's Political Caucus and executed research on paid family and medical leave at the Rockefeller Center's Public Policy Research Shop. Within the Dartmouth community, she has risen to leadership positions such as Director General of Dartmouth Model United Nations, Communications Director for the Dartmouth College Democrats, and a Senior Editor for the Dartmouth Law Journal. Lucy's diplomacy and intelligence will make for a truly informative and productive debate today.
Thank you so much, Quinn, but that is enough about us. For those who do not know either of our candidates, today is especially exciting because both of them have special ties to our college. Many of our peers know Maggie Goodlander as Professor Goodlander, as she taught a class here at Dartmouth on constitutional law last summer. Maggie, we will try not to hold it against you that you didn't offer the class to us for our sophomore summer. Born and raised in Nashua, Maggie's family has called New Hampshire home for more than 100 years. Her mother ran for Congress in this district back when Maggie was young, inspiring her to dedicate her life to public service and fighting back against bullies. She has worked in the United States Senate, clerked on the United States Supreme Court, served as counsel on the first impeachment of former President Trump, worked as a Deputy Assistant Attorney General at the DOJ, and helped the White House on key policy issues like reproductive rights. Maggie, we are so lucky to have you here with us today, and we'd like to welcome you up to the stage.
Colin Van Ostern is also not a new face around Dartmouth's campus, having received an MBA from the Tuck School of Business back in 2009. Colin is also a two-term New Hampshire executive counselor who boasts many great achievements, including restoring funding to New Hampshire's Planned Parenthood twice. Colin has also worked as a business manager in many New Hampshire companies, including Stonyfield Yogurt and Southern New Hampshire University. Colin knows this district well, having won it during his run for governor against Chris Sununu in 2016. He currently lives in Concord with his wife Kristen, his 13 and 10-year-old sons, and their dog Mira. Colin, we'd like to welcome you to the stage as well. It's so great to have you back in Hanover.
During this debate, Quinn and I will ask the candidates a series of questions that focus on a list of topics the candidates received prior to their arrival today. Candidates will have 2 minutes each to answer the questions, followed by a 30-second rebuttal if deemed necessary by the moderators based on a standard we agreed upon earlier today. Please hold your applause until after the 2 minutes have expired for each candidate. After we've exhausted all of our questions, we will turn it back over to the candidates to provide closing remarks before finishing out our program and beginning a short meet and greet.
But before we do that, each candidate will open the debate by introducing themselves to you with a 3-minute introduction. By virtue of a coin toss, candidate Van Ostern will begin by introducing himself, followed by candidate Goodlander. The candidates will then alternate answering questions first for the remainder of the forum. With that, let's begin. Colin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. How's everyone doing?
Good.
All right. Lucy and Quinn, you guys are amazing. Your dedication is awesome. It is great to see so many people here. It is a testament to so many in the community, and I know folks are online too, so thank you everybody for being here. I'm really excited for the discussion. I thought I would share a little bit about my background and then also some of the things that we can get done in the next 2 years under our next Congress, and I look forward to the questions too. So I moved to New Hampshire 22 years ago, and it was the 18th house that I ever moved into. And that's a lot of moving. Sometimes people ask if I come from a military family, and my grandfather was a Marine, but my parents didn't serve. They were just really indecisive. and it's true. I've tried to come up with a more diplomatic way to say it. I've decided that is the diplomatic way. We moved around a lot. But the point is, this is the first place in my life that I ever felt like home. I met my wife 2 weeks after I moved here. I now have an 11-year-old, actually. He's had a birthday recently. 11-year-old and a 13-year-old who live a mile from the hospital where they were born in. It is a life that I literally only could have dreamed of when I was a kid. And I have found that this is an extraordinary place where you can have world-class impact right here in New Hampshire. I worked at places like Stonyfield Yogurt, a great example of a company that you can show that growth and profit are exactly hand in hand with healthy people and healthy planet, which is right in the mission of the company. Came to places like the Tuck School, probably the most impactful resume bullet point for those of you who are older than students is that I worked in the kitchen at the Canoe Club, and worked at the college. And I found my way to places like Southern New Hampshire University. When I had gone to college, I ran out of student loans myself and put $33,000 of tuition on a credit card. And so I left Stonyfield to go work at SNU to help build a college program for helping students get debt-free degrees. Nearly 10,000 students graduated from that program. The vast majority took on 0 loans at all. And I found my way to the Executive Council, something no one, when they're an undergrad at Dartmouth, I can imagine, ever dreams of doing. But our Executive Council, as Quinn mentioned, shut off funding for Planned Parenthood health centers in our state, birth control and cancer screenings and annual exams. And I stepped up, and Chris Pappas stepped up, and Deborah Pignatelli stepped up, and we won, and we got funding restored. At the same time, they say history doesn't repeat itself, but sometimes it rhymes. I remember when the US Supreme Court ruled the Affordable Care Act could not be implemented the way President Obama wrote it. It would be up to every state to figure out whether or not and how we would expand Medicaid. It was a big debate in New Hampshire. The final debate actually was here in Hanover, a field hearing we had for the Executive Council, a 3-2 vote. And 10 years later, because of that, 100,000 people in our state have cheaper, better health care. My point is this: elections have consequences. I know what it means to fight for and make progress for the people of New Hampshire. I'm excited about the opportunity ahead. I look forward to talking about what we can do in the United States Congress on these exact issues: protecting reproductive rights, lowering health care costs, cutting student debt, and I'll be a New Hampshire candidate who's in it for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And Maggie, the floor is yours.
Lucy, Quinn, thank you so much. Thanks to Dartmouth for bringing us all together tonight. Thank you, everyone who's here tonight in person and on the screen. I'm going to begin at the beginning. I was born on Election Day in Nashua. And my mom, Betty, who's here tonight, she went into labor, and she went directly to the polling place to vote before she went to the hospital to give birth. She's a real fighter, and because of her, so am I. You know, when I was 2 years old, Lucy mentioned this, my mom ran for this seat. Her detractors came up with a slogan. It was, "A woman's place is in the home, not in the house." That was a winning slogan in 1988, if you can believe it. But my mom raised me right here in New Hampshire to believe, as I do today, deep in my bones, that a woman's place is absolutely in the people's house. And you know what? It's also in the White House, so we got to get that done on November 5th. I love this state. It's the state who made me who I am today. I've got a granite backbone to prove it. From my living room in Nashua today, I can see the factory where my great-grandfather worked, and I can see the hospital where I was born after my mom voted, of course. I became a lawyer here by training, but I became an advocate in my heart. And I've represented people in the most consequential and vulnerable moments of their life in New Hampshire family courts. I've worked in our drug courts, and I've fought on the front lines of the fight for the right from which all of our rights flow, and that's the right to vote. I've done that alongside some of the most patriotic Granite Staters I know, and I love our Constitution. I have loved teaching constitutional law here at Dartmouth. No one calls me professor. I'm Maggie Dewall. And I've loved teaching at UNH Law. I've always gone where I believed I could fight the good fight, and I could deliver on the issues that matter most to New Hampshire families. I served 11 years as an intelligence officer in the Navy Reserve, and as a lawyer, I helped to impeach former President and now convicted felon Donald Trump. In the Biden-Harris administration, I went to the White House and helped lead an agenda dedicated to uniting Americans around the most pressing and big issues that we face, including our mental health crisis here in New Hampshire and across the country. I clerked for Justice Stephen Breyer. He wrote the dissenting opinion the day that Roe v. Wade was overturned. And the day that decision came down, I think we all remember where we were. I was at the Justice Department helping to fight back. I've fought against the most powerful corporations in the world on the front lines of the fight against corporate monopolies who are screwing New Hampshire family farmers right around here in the Upper Valley, who are jacking up costs. We've got huge fights to fight, and I'm in this race because day 3 on the job, this is a job interview, so I really look forward to your questions, because growing up here, you learn how to grill a candidate before you learn how to grill a hot dog, and it's important that you grill us, because this is a hard job and an unprecedented moment. So I look forward to your questions. I'm in this race because I can deliver for this district on day 1. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. We'll now move into the question and answer portion of the debate. This first question will go to you, Maggie. As the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs v. Jackson opened the door to states passing restrictive abortion bans and shutting down health and safety clinics for all, Granite Staters have watched as far-right legislators in their home state have attempted to pass 15-day abortion bans and destroy a woman's right to choice. How do you plan to preserve the fundamental right to bodily autonomy and restore the rights of women both in New Hampshire and across the country?
Look, generations of women fought so that we'd have freedom over our own bodies. They fought that fight, and 2 years ago, the Supreme Court ripped away that fundamental right. It was a dark day for this country, and the impacts, no one has been immune from the impacts of the Dobbs decision. You know, the day that decision came down, I was at the Justice Department helping to stand up a reproductive rights task force dedicated to 2 basic propositions: that women in this country should get access to the health care that they need, and doctors in this country should be able to provide that care without fear of prosecution. But every single day in this country, women are denied care, and doctors are unable to provide that care. This is wrong. This is not America. Here we are in the live free or die state, and freedom is on the ballot this fall. So this is a fight that begins in Congress, but it doesn't end there. And every day on the campaign trail, I've heard about Project 2025. I'm glad about that. You know why? Because it is a 900-page, bone-chilling document that has something in it to scare the living daylights out of anyone. What we're up against is the threat of a nationwide abortion ban. And look, I think representation matters on this issue. I think we need people who have skin in the game. For too long, the law has been written by men who don't understand women's bodies. And, you know, I know that the decision has touched so many of you in this room here tonight, personally and deeply. My husband, Jake, and I, we want to become parents. And for us, it's been a real journey. I had 20 weeks pregnant last year. We lost our son, and I was able to get access to the health care I needed ultimately. But too many women in this country do not, and I will fight with everything I've got until we get our freedom back. Thank you.
You have 2 minutes to respond.
Thank you. I'm 45 years old. For 43 of those years, women had basic fundamental rights that the U.S. Supreme Court took away. And Congress has a role in fixing this, a really important role. Our Congress exists to put our national values into law, and there are some very specific things that we can do to build the positive change that we need that comes out of this moment. We need to pass a national law that protects the full range of reproductive rights. That means birth control access, that means IVF access, that means abortion access no matter where you live. It means right to travel, right to practice. This is something that we can do, and there are important elements here like repealing the Hyde Amendment, ensuring that low-income women who have coverage in healthcare through Medicaid get the coverage that they need, repealing the global gag rule. There's a lot here that we can do. This is a cause that I have devoted much of my life to. I was raised by a single mom. I ran for the executive council for this very specific purpose when Planned Parenthood funding was shut off for our state. And I'll share a story because I remember distinctly, it wasn't that long after I left Tuck, actually. When I was 31 years old, I ran for executive council. At the time, it was 5 Republicans on the executive council. And never had it been controversial to have access to birth control and family planning and well woman exams in our state Planned Parenthood health centers. But they shut that off, and I spent time that summer trying to find someone to run. And finally, a friend said, "Why don't you run, Colin?" And Kristen, my wife, thought it was a good idea. And I went and I talked to Annie Custer. And I said, "Annie, I'm 31 years old. I have a 1-year-old at home, which means I've not slept in a year. I'm tens of thousands of dollars in student debt, and I'm a straight white guy running to get Planned Parenthood funding restored. Does this even make sense?" And she said, "Colin, this takes all of us, every gender, every generation. If this is just a fight of the women who remember life before Roe, we're never going to win." It gave me huge confidence. It's why I ran. Chris Pappas ran, Deborah Pignatelli ran. We got it done, and we can get this done in our next Congress. We can pass a national law to protect reproductive rights.
Thank you both very much for your answers. We move on to question number 2. In 2023, more than 6,000 teenagers and children were shot in the United States, contributing to more than 40,000 total gun deaths across the country. As you both prepare to serve alongside individuals who proudly bear AR-15 lapel pins on the floor of the House of Representatives, the news of new mass shootings this year will continue to break. How will you balance the competing interests of Granite Staters while also taking action to prevent 2025 from becoming yet another year plagued by gun violence?
Quinn, thanks for the question. I don't think they're competing interests. I think we all have the same interest here. And I say that as both a gun owner and a father myself. I have an 11-year-old and 13-year-old. 6 months ago, we had an active shooter situation in Concord with multiple fatalities. One of my kids was walking home as that happened. In our community, there are 3 different families within blocks of my house who have had different active shooter situations that they've been personally involved in. I promise you there's no parent who has been on the text chain the moment that something like this breaks on the news who is not going to take action. Those texts pop up fast and furious. Who's going to pick up Peter? Who's going to pick up Sam? Where is Graham? Oh, can you get him? And no one cares what your party is in that moment. There's a generation of students today who have gone through active shooter situations, or active shooter drills in their schools, who will be our lawmakers tomorrow, some of them in the very next election. We can and must bring change. That means universal background checks. That means getting assault weapons off of our streets. And I say this as a gun owner myself. There's nothing contradictory about supporting the Second Amendment, the second word of which, by the way, is the word well-regulated. There's nothing contradictory about supporting the Second Amendment and also ensuring that we have basic gun violence prevention measures in our country. It is the #1 cause of death, gun violence, of our teenagers and our kids, and our next Congress has to take action.
It is the #1 cause of death, gun violence, for our kids in America today. And the Surgeon General issued a chilling warning on precisely this point. This is not the America that we should be living in today. For our kids, for women, women in this country, we're at a 30% bigger risk that we'll be killed by guns just because we're down right across the border from Canada. This is wrong, and we've got to do something about it. When I teach the Constitution here and you read the Second Amendment, you're absolutely right, Colin. There's nothing about the Second Amendment that prohibits common sense solutions that we should be advancing and that I want to fight for on day one in Congress. That means banning assault weapons, military-style assault weapons. I know from my time in the Navy that there is no place for these weapons of war in our communities. It's about closing loopholes that are allowing for guns to be in the hands of people who should never have a gun in the first place. We've got to ban we got to ban bump stocks. Donald Trump was in favor of banning bump stocks. So this is something I think we can make progress on. And, you know, in the Biden-Harris administration, we signed into law the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which was the most significant piece of gun violence legislation in the last 30 years. That, I hope, we'll look back and see that was a small step in the right direction. There are two things that I really want to prioritize on this issue, and one is taking on the gun industry, which for too long has been the beneficiary of immunity that has allowed them to go unchecked. I want to take the NRA and the gun industry on day one. I also want to prioritize funding mental health, because what we see is that gun violence and gun deaths in this country can be prevented on the front end. So we've really got to invest in the sources of our strength. We've got to invest in the extraordinary people here across New Hampshire who are providing mental health services and keeping our kids and our communities safe. That's what I want to fight for on day one.
Immigration is a topic at the forefront of many voters' minds. As the Republican Party continues to vilify and dehumanize immigrants and make the path to citizenship more difficult, not less, Democratic voters grow increasingly concerned about the xenophobic mindset infiltrating American politics. How will you legislate in a manner that both protects the human rights of people entering the country and balances Granite State interests?
So every day on the campaign trail, I think about my great-grandfather who came to this country when he was 16 years old from northern Greece. He didn't speak a word of English. He came through Ellis Island. And because our immigration laws were written then to meet that moment, he was able to come to this country. He got a job as a dishwasher in a hotel in New York City. He earned enough money, learned enough English to negotiate for a better wage, and earned enough money to make his way to Nashua, New Hampshire. And I grew up down the street from the farm that he built. Because he was able to pursue the American dream, my grandfather got his start as a door-to-door Electrolux vacuum cleaner salesman. And some of you may have purchased one of his vacuum cleaners. I think about him too when I'm knocking doors. And he was able to pursue the American dream. My mom went on to graduate from UNH and to serve in our state house. And that's because we had immigration laws on the books that were ready to meet the moment. Today, we have laws that are outdated. We have a system that is overburdened and that cannot deliver for our country. We are a nation of immigrants, and we've got to update our laws to meet this moment. Early in my career, I went to the United States Senate as a staffer, and I helped work on a bipartisan, comprehensive immigration reform and border security bill. Now, that might sound like familiar to you, because what we saw just a few months ago was a similar bill, a framework for the future. We got this bill through the United States Senate. It was one of my early heartbreaks in government when the bill didn't make its way through the House of Representatives, but it continues to be a framework for the future. And Donald Trump is standing in between the American people and the immigration reform we need. This is wrong. We've got to fight this fight. One thing I learned from this experience is that sometimes comprehensive can be the enemy of progress, and we've got to be ready to be nimble and to advance the solutions that our country needs in whatever way we can to update these laws and to make sure that our immigration system is advancing who we are as a country, and that is a nation of immigrants.
Well, thank you for the question. Washington has been broken for so long when it comes to immigration, and it's really hurting our communities, it's hurting our country, it's hurting our politics, it's hurting our trust in each other. I believe that we need to pull two separate issues apart here. One is border security, and the other is comprehensive immigration reform. On border security, we finally saw overdue bipartisan cooperation this past spring, and it is crystal clear why that was killed, for political reasons only. But I think most of us probably watched the State of the Union and saw some of the most conservative Republican senators in the chamber agree with Joe Biden that the border security bill that was up would have made an important first step for the country. Right now, if you make it over our southern border and ask for asylum, it can take up to 6 years to have a fair hearing. That bill would have meant 6 weeks. That's good for everyone involved. We need to have a step like that happen soon. But it's not just about border security. We also need comprehensive immigration reform. I've As an employer here in New Hampshire, had 3 times where we've lost a valued employee on our team because they had a visa renewal application that had a typo from the government or other similar snafus, and there are just decades of backlogs and problems. When you're in a small company in New Hampshire and that happens, it's a huge problem. It's a problem for the individual, for their family. It's a problem when you have to backfill the job. We have low unemployment in New Hampshire. And so one of the issues that we have is that we need to be able to have the high quality available workforce that we need. And I believe there are sensible independents and Republicans across this country who also believe that comprehensive immigration reform to ensure that we have the workforce that we need in this country, to ensure that we can bring people out of the shadows, to ensure that we have a pathway to citizenship for people who've spent their whole lives here, who've paid taxes, who've played by the rules. This makes our state in New Hampshire stronger if we can get it done. It makes our country stronger. Washington hasn't been able to do it, and it's going to take folks who have had these experiences in their lives to be able to fight hard and work across the aisle to get it done.
Thank you both very much for your answers. Moving on to question number 4. South Africa, with support from 33 other nations, has filed a lawsuit in the International Court of Justice against the State of Israel for the crimes of genocide. The lead prosecutor for the International Criminal Court announced 2 months ago that he would seek warrants for the arrest of top Israeli and Hamas military officials, including Prime Minister Netanyahu. The United States has opposed all of these measures and claims to provide their own solutions, yet the death toll in Gaza climbs every day. Do you believe that the United States is properly using its international influence, and how would you work on the Hill to bring an end to this suffering?
Well, thanks for the question, and thanks for the conversation that we had a few months ago. One of the first conversations I had in this campaign was here on campus, sitting down with a group of students talking about this issue. And I remember, actually, Quinn, I remember your words that day. We had a great conversation, and I remember you saying, I'm not quite sure if I agree with everything you just said, but you gave me a 5-minute answer, and the last politician here gave me a 15-second answer, and all I know is this is not a 15-second problem. So I'll do my best to share a few thoughts, but understanding the time restriction, I want to call out the fact that it's complicated and nuanced and important. Long-term, we desperately need a 2-state solution. This is the way to break the cycle of violence that we have in Israel. We need to use all the diplomatic tools that we have as a nation to pursue a 2-state solution and to support Israel in doing that. The terrorism that we saw last fall on October 7th was a level that is hard for most of us to imagine in this country. Remember, Israel is 30 times smaller than we are. So 1,200 people killed, hundreds taken hostage. Imagine that times 30 in our nation. So I think we need to start by acknowledging Israel has a right to defend itself. It has a right to exist. It is an important and special ally of our country. And there's nothing that's contradictory with those words to also acknowledge the humanitarian crisis we have seen since is untenable, that cannot continue. 1 million civilians displaced, 1 million facing famine, tens of thousands killed. We need to do everything we can to stop that. That includes urgency around a ceasefire, that includes return of hostages, getting Hamas out of operational control. But it also, to have it be lasting, a military solution alone is not going to fix this. There has to be a diplomatic solution so that the people of Israel and Palestine both have representative self-governance under a 2-state solution. That is the long-term solution here. And the last thing I'll say is this has affected a lot of people in our own community. In addition to talking to students, I met with the chair of the board of Hillel here. I met with the rabbi of our local temple in Concord. And we need to understand also that the tragedy that's happening over there is manifesting in real concerns about anti-Semitism in our own communities, and we need to guard against that, make sure that we're protecting free speech, and also ensuring that everyone in our community feels safe and included. Thank you.
You know, one of the things I loved about teaching here at Dartmouth is this is a community where you can tackle the hardest issues in the world, literally, and the hardest issues in our country. And teaching constitutional law here, you know, I had a lot of friends and colleagues around the country who said, you know, this is a crazy time to be teaching the Constitution. It's really hard on college campuses. What I felt here at Dartmouth was every conversation I had about the Constitution, every conversation I've had about this really important issue has been one where I've learned something, and I'm grateful for that. So thank you for the question. You asked, what should Congress and what should the United States of America be focused on? And I think I'd say at the outset that Congress has a really important role to play in American foreign policy, in part because there are disruptions and changes in administration that happen. And so when the executive branch has a monopoly on foreign policy, it's not a good thing for America or for the world. So I think that Congress has a really important role to play. And here's what I'd say about the situation. Anyone who looks at what's happening in Gaza right now can be nothing but heartbroken. The level of human suffering is devastating. And what I would be focused on as a member of Congress is a deal that has been put on the table and has been supported by the UN Security Council, by the G7, by Israel, and by Hamas too. And that's a deal that prioritizes three things at the outset. The first is an immediate ceasefire, because we need a measure of calm in order to be able to do point two, which is extremely important, and that has a surge in humanitarian assistance into Gaza. Today, there are 2 million people who are at high or extreme risk of food insecurity and starvation. We've got to get the humanitarian assistance into the people who need it. The third piece, equally important, essential, is a return of the hostages who have been kept in absolutely brutal captivity since October 7th of last year. We got to bring the hostages home, and we've got to do all these three things. It's going to take a unified bipartisan effort from the United States Congress and our government to do this.
Thank you both for your thoughtful answers. The United States is experiencing an affordable housing crisis. As young people like us struggle to plan how we are going to afford to live on our own after college, older generations similarly struggle with the decision to remain in the workforce for fear of losing their family homes. What do you see as Congress's role in addressing this housing crisis, and how will you use your power to make life better for Granite Staters?
This is an issue I hear about everywhere I go in our district. The number I think about every day is 82%. 82% is the increase that we've seen in the cost of a single-family home here in New Hampshire in the last 6 years. It's also the increase in the cost of median rent in this county. So for seniors on fixed income, for young people who are trying to build a life and a home and find a home, having a home is the cornerstone of the American dream. It's out of reach. It's completely out of reach. So Congress has a central role to play in addressing the housing crisis. And I'd say a few things. The first is we know that we need to build 60,000 new homes here in New Hampshire by 2030. So we're going to have to prioritize every tool that we can to meet that demand and to meet that moment, to make that happen for our state. That means we've got to bring money in to address the infrastructure needs that we have, water and sewage. It means that we're going to have to work at all levels of government to make sure that we don't have local or state level laws that are preventing the building of affordable homes. But I know from my time at the Justice Department in the Antitrust Division, where I was laser focused on three parts of our extremely consolidated economy, and those were healthcare, agriculture, and housing. What we see across this country, just take, for example, the cost of a single family home. We see multi-billion-dollar private equity firms and hedge funds buying up single-family homes all across this country and in this state and jacking up the price of buying a home. We see the use by corporate landlords of algorithms using our own data for their gain to jack up the price of rent. Price fixing used to happen in smoke-filled rooms. Today it happens using the most efficient tools imaginable, our own data and algorithms that have jacked up the cost of rent all across this country. So this is something I want to take this fight to Congress because we've got to make housing affordable in this country.
Moving on to our, so sorry. Continue.
No problem. I had a chance to talk with Tim McNamara, an important member of this community and the mayor next door in Lebanon about this issue. He told me there basically are no more starter homes in the Upper Valley. And I see a lot of people nodding when I say those words. Folks commuting from Claremont, and to be honest, this is not unique to the Upper Valley. We are seeing huge problems all across our state. I met with folks from Ahead and Littleton, met with the mayor, Dale Gerard, down in Claremont, to see what we could do to bring more congressional funds, more federal funds to the local area, toured some of our affordable housing communities in Lebanon that Twin Pine manages. And the truth is, this is not just affecting just affordable housing. It is every single point of the income spectrum: workforce housing, affordable housing. Even folks who are trying to downsize can't, because often housing prices have doubled and mortgage rates have doubled. So what can we do about it? Next year, trillions of dollars of the Trump tax cuts for the very, very wealthiest in this country will begin to sunset. And it is time to make sure that we have some of those funds to do things like one of Tim's ideas, first-time homebuyer tax credit. Right now, median home in New Hampshire costs about $560,000 a year. Who has over $100,000 for a down payment for a home? It's crazy. But if we can use some of those funds of letting the Trump tax cuts for the very wealthiest, very biggest corporations fund things like a first-time homebuyer tax credit, cut our federal deficits to put downward pressure on interest rates so that every new mortgage is cheaper, every refinancing is cheaper, every small business that wants to expand is cheaper. These are real things that will matter. And I'll say a couple other things here. In New London right now, we are having a lot of problem with water and sewer. We just passed a infrastructure bill, our own federal tax dollars, that we need to be aggressive about getting back here in our communities, paying for town water, paying for town sewer. And I am proud in this race to be a voice for our local communities on these issues. Dale and Tim and every single mayor who's a Democrat in this district has endorsed me in this race, and it's because they know I will be a voice for our communities, fighting to get our tax dollars back, fighting to raise their voices up, fighting to lower the cost of housing and increase affordable housing in our state. Thank you.
I was so excited to hear your answer, I cut you off, and for that, I do apologize. For question 6, we're moving to a slightly different area. There have been 18 anti-trans bills proposed in the New Hampshire legislature so far in 2024, with almost all of them targeting transgender youth. As some of the most vulnerable members of the queer community, trans youth have been the target of Republican tirades that all queer Americans know to be the latest outlet for fear-mongering and homophobia. How do you plan to protect these young people in our communities through access to gender-affirming care and support them against right-wing attacks to their existence?
It's incredibly important, and I'm going to try to not get emotional when I talk about my kids a second time today. They're 11 and 13, and the single most important thing in their life is not me, it's not their mom, it's not their dog Mira, it's playing basketball. and I have watched them learn discipline and hard work and teamwork, and the idea that right-wing politicians are trying to pit us against each other by taking sports away from children is just so appalling to me. It's so fundamentally wrong. By the way, our kids have this figured out a lot better than my generation, and a lot better than the generations that came before me. They know that we need to include everybody. They know that we need to protect the human dignity of every member of their community. They know the idea that telling a kid that they can't participate in something that's so vital to being a child and growing up. And I know it's about more than sports, but that's the issue that we see pop up in the news, on Twitter. It's one of those political wedge issues where people try to divide us against each other, but here's the truth. In our communities, we are not divided. Somebody came to our school board in Concord and complained about my kid's music teacher wearing a skirt and thought that it wasn't appropriate for someone who's a man to be wearing a skirt at school. And the community came together, and one of the moms of one of the children who themselves is non-binary in that class stepped up and she ran for school board. And she won with about 70% of the vote. Our communities are not divided. Our communities support inclusion, they support equality, they support our children, we support each other, and we need national laws that reflect these values, and I promise I will be a strong advocate for that if you give me the chance to represent our district in Washington. Thank you.
On my first date with my husband, Jake, I shared with him the state motto of New Hampshire is live free or die. And he said, really? Live free or die? There's no other option? He was born in Vermont. But you know what? We are the live free or die state, and we believe it with our whole hearts. And look, freedom is on the ballot this fall, and the attacks on freedom come from the same people against the same basic core ideas. It's an attack on our ability to control and have freedom over our own bodies, but it's a deeper attack on freedom to be who we are, to read the books that we want to read, to teach the books that we want to teach. You know, I used to have a mug that had a list, this is about 10 years ago, of all the books that had been banned in America on one mug. Today, I don't think we could fit all of the books that have been banned in New Hampshire on a single mug. This is wrong. These attacks are coming against the people who are most vulnerable, our kids. And you're right, Colin, in sports. I mean, I learned everything that I know today that matters on the sports fields, Mine Falls and Nashua, and at Birch Hill Elementary School. This is a place, sports fields, athletics, this is where people come together in a real way in this country. And the assaults on this defy common sense. They defy our Constitution. We have the Constitution on our side, and we have common sense on our side. In calling this out as a pretextual set of challenges to who we are as Americans. And look, when you read the Dobbs decision and you teach the Dobbs decision, as I did here last summer, that decision is a blueprint for ripping away so many fundamental rights. The right to marry who we love, to be who we are. This is the fight of our lifetimes, and it's a fight for freedom, and freedom is on the ballot this fall, and that's what brings me to this race. And I'm going to fight with everything I've got.
We'll now move on to our seventh and final question for you all. We have been told time and time again that this is the most consequential election of our lifetimes. Democracy is on the ballot in 2024. This congressional district has been put on the NRCC's target list, funneling Republican dollars into flipping this seat red. It is imperative that we once again elect a Democrat in CD2. Why do you think that you are the candidate most well-equipped to defeat a Republican challenger in this district and become the next congressperson for New Hampshire?
I got into this race because I love this state. I love this district. It made me who I am today. And I'm ready on day one to fight for this district and to deliver. You know, as a candidate, I'm not a professional politician or a perennial candidate, but I'm a person who loves this state and loves this country and got into this race knowing that I was going to need to out-hustle and out-raise and out-persuade. And that's what we've been trying to do. We're running an old-school New Hampshire campaign. We're pounding the pavement for a very small state. This is a big district, 6,500 square miles, from my hometown, Nashua, all the way up to the North Country. I was up in the North Country recently, I should say, and someone said, "Where are you from?" I said, "Nashua." He said, "Oh, Dixie." It's a big district, but it's from Dixie all the way up to Dixville Notch and beyond. There are common issues, and it's not an overstatement. I wish it were to say that this is the most consequential election of our lifetimes. Democracy's on the ballot, freedom's on the ballot, fairness is on the ballot. Everything that makes us who we are as Americans is on the ballot, and all you need to do is read Project 2025 to see what we're up against. I've been on the front lines of these fights my entire career. I helped impeach Donald Trump. That was the first time, it wasn't the last time. And day 3 on this job is January 6th. We need people who are ready to deliver on day 1. I've spent my life taking on, there are way too many bullies in America today. There are way too many bullies in the world today. I've spent my life taking bullies on, and I want to do that on behalf of this district. I want to fight for and deliver for this district, and that's what I'm ready to do. You know, the People's House is less than 30% women. We don't have enough women in this fight. We don't have enough veterans in this fight. I'm going to bring everything I know, all the values that I learned here in New Hampshire, to the Congress, just as I have every time I've taken an oath to serve our country and our state. So it'd be an honor of my lifetime to serve you there. Thank you.
It's a really important question. For the last 20, 25 years of my life, I have been devoting it to the people of this state. Volunteering at our nonprofits, leading some of our most innovative businesses, representing 49 cities and towns, red, purple, and blue cities and towns across this state. I've coached my kids' basketball teams, learned an extraordinary amount from the people of this district. And I've had the chance not just to represent people in this district, but to win this exact district before. In a tough year of 2016, not a great year for Democrats, up against a tough opponent in Chris Sununu, someone with universal name ID, well-known family. I won this exact district that year, and I'll tell you how. Because when I was representing the people of this district, I fought for everybody, Democrats, Republicans, independents. You go to Hinsdale, far from a blue town in this state, and there's a bridge being built right now that will be finished and cars will go over it in the next year. It had been on and off the 10-year plan since 1986, and I worked with Republicans and independents to get it back on the 10-year plan, and it is getting done this year. That's how you win votes in a place like Hinsdale. I'm incredibly proud of the campaign that we're building. Our congresswoman, sitting congresswoman who knows how to win this district, has endorsed me in this race. Every single Democratic mayor in this district. I don't have the most money in the race, but I do have overwhelming grassroots support. An overwhelming majority of our state lawmakers, 100 pro-choice leaders who announced me days after we started this campaign. And I know what it takes to win, and it starts with a grassroots effort. The vast majority of the money we raise from people right here in this district. That sets me apart in this race. And I focused on issues, some of them that we're talking about today, like reproductive rights, but some of them that we haven't yet, like how we get money out of politics, how we have independent redistricting reform, term limits on our Supreme Court, things that Democrats, Republicans, and independents agree on. This is how we win. I've done it before in this district. I've delivered for the people of this district, and that's how we're going to win together this fall.
With that, we will wrap up our questions portion of the Q&A. Thank you both so much for your thoughtful replies and your candor here with us today. With that, we'd like to turn it back over to you, and we won't dictate any more what you say, and deliver a 2-minute closing statement. Colin, the floor is yours.
You want me to go first again?
No.
We can switch it. Okay, my apologies. Maggie, you go first.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank you both again for being such terrific moderators, and I want to thank you all for being here tonight. I should have said at the outset that I'm glad to be COVID-free and with you tonight, just as soon as we thought that the pandemic was over. So I appreciate you being here tonight and bringing us together, because no one does democracy better than we do here in New Hampshire. And this is democracy in action. So on a Monday night in August, to have a room full of people like this and many others online gives me a lot of hope. I've loved running for Congress. I really have. It's been one of the most energizing and optimistic experiences I've had in my whole life, because I get great questions every day, just as we did tonight, and because people are engaged. We know what we're up against. We are up against the fight of our lifetimes. We are up against the peaceful transfer of power. The question has been called. It was called 8 years ago by Donald Trump in a debate, and it's a question that remains. And that's why I've said tonight, and I think about it every day, that January 6th is day 3 on this job. On day 1, I'm ready to hit the ground running out of the gate to deliver for this district, to deliver for our state, and to deliver for our country. We're running an old school New Hampshire campaign, and I really hope you'll join us. We are pounding the pavement, we're knocking doors. I've got so many of my beloved team members here tonight, and I'm really glad to see you, because it's gonna be a lot of work. We've gotta keep this seat blue. We've gotta take back the people's house, because the path to taking back the people's house runs directly through this district. We can't do it without keeping this seat blue, and that's what I'm ready to do. I hope you'll join us. It would be the honor of my lifetime to represent you in the United States House of Representatives, and I'm gonna work my heart out to earn every single vote. I hope tonight is the first of many conversations, and I wanna thank you again for having us. And thank you, Colin, for being here for this important conversation too.
Thank you, everybody, for coming, for being this engaged. Thank you, everybody who is watching from home. I think about some of the leaders who I admire, people who've proven to be effective for us in the U.S. Congress. People like Annie Kuster, Chris Pappas, Maggie Hassan, Jean Shaheen. What do they share? What's unified about them? Those 4 leaders know this state like the back of their hand. They hold our lives in their hearts. They know our communities. They advocate for us. Being an elected official isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being a good listener and raising up the voices of other people. That's how you make a difference. The way we got Medicaid expansion done, it was a tough debate, tough fight. But I remember, and Chris Sununu was trying to do every delaying tactic in the book, trying to push the vote off to another day. But I had met a young man named Dante in Keene who told me what it was like to start with pills and graduate to worse, to start living on friends' couches and then experience homelessness. And there was no way I was going to stop. No way I was going to let someone like Dante not get the care that we need. And we expanded Medicaid, and we did it with mental health coverage and substance abuse and addiction coverage. Dante's a recovery coach today. You have to be fighting for the people like Dante, and that means you need to spend your life here and fight for our communities in all the ways so many of us do. Throughout the conversation today, I've shared a lot of stories. Almost in every single answer, occasionally embarrassing, sometimes about my kids. But these are the stories that I bring with me in my heart, and if you want to make a difference in the US Congress, as our congressional delegation does and has, you need to have those stories with you. I'll be a New Hampshire leader who delivers for us, a New Hampshire leader who's in it for us. And if that's what's important to you, I'm asking for your vote. Thank you so much for being part of this.
Thank you both so much for your comments throughout this debate, and once again for taking the time to come up to Hanover and engage with our students and our community. Though we have said it a few times already, it bears repeating. We are truly so lucky to have had you here with us today to share your thoughtful remarks with all of us. A special thank you once again to our sponsors at the Rockefeller Center, the Hanover Lime and the Hanover Lime Democrats. We could not have coordinated this event without you. We would also be remiss if we did not take a moment to especially thank Devorah Greenberg-Coling, Assistant Director for Public Programs and Special Events at the Rockefeller Center, who spent countless hours organizing everyone you've seen here today to make this event such a resounding success. Please join us in giving her a very special round of applause. To those of you who joined us in person and on the live stream, thank you so much for joining our programming today. As two government students, it truly inspires us to know that you all feel the same drive to understand and engage with the democratic process as we do.
For those of you who are here in person with us today, we will now have an opportunity for you both to meet all of our candidates. Maggie Goodlander will remain here in the auditorium, and Colin Van Ostern and his team will be just outside in the foyer. The candidates will remain in their designated areas, and you can move around and chat with them as you'd like. If there is a line to meet the candidates, please grab some refreshments from the foyer, and feel free to mingle as you wait your turn. The candidates will be here until at least 7, so there's plenty of time to engage with them and your fellow attendees. Thank you all for your participation. Make sure you go vote on September 10th, and have a great rest of your Monday night. Thank you.